if maybe you could just come stand here just to start, right? We'll have people lined up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Denise is gonna start. Obviously, we'll have all the participants stand on this step. Excellent. So we'll just kind of stand here. Yeah, we're just trying to line up now, and then Mayor Steinberg will stand up on this step. The presenters, you're going to be right next to Tanish here. So just step on that step if you're comfortable. And then Carlos, you're going to be following the mayor, and I think it's okay if you just sort of fill in, and we just have a straight line behind this podium, right? Okay. So Carlos will be here, and then Phil, you'll be next to Carlos.
His space.
And then
she's on her way, I think.
She's pretty punctual, so I'm surprised, I think what's thrown everybody off, and there's no excuse for it, because I fail on this all the time, is the amount of distance that we've been now having to go from one building.
Oh yeah, you're farther now, right?
Well, that's why we're wearing tennis shoes. Because remember, I'm putting in 5 assists.
the district attorney will be here with next to Phil.
Steps,
Yes, that's great.
Is that what you're telling me? Put the rowdies down at the end.
And then where's these on
Right here.
Oh, there you go.
Right
So sorry.
No, you're good.
And then you're just gonna come down here and go after the district attorney, so folks can sort of slide in a little bit.
And then
Everyone
step back over here
just
when
gonna
we're done?
slide in. Yeah, and so guys, as you can see, we're just gonna go. I'm sorry. Step down to this step, right? And then it's just a step up to the podium, and then a step back.
Yeah, be careful with that step right there. It looks like you're leaning.
Yeah, be a little bit careful. It's a little bit, and the way that we're going to do this is Denise's going to kick it off and really ground us, and then she'll introduce you, Mayor Steinberg. When you completed your remarks, you can just introduce Carlos from ACLU California Action. Sure. That would be great. Carlos, you'll introduce Phil from Smart Justice California. Is there a title or anything that you want to associate with you?
Oh, I'll say it.
All right, perfect. Just introduce Philip from Smart Justice California. Great. Philip, when you're done giving your remarks, you'll introduce District Attorney Tori River Salazar from San Joaquin County.
But the names are written up there, right?
Sorry.
District Attorney, when you're done giving your remarks, you will introduce, you'll introduce Senator Maria Lane Ross, who can slide in right here.
And the names are up
Just
there.
say senator.
Yeah.
Which is a great title.
Yep.
I mean, that's
Maria Lane Ross, Senator, and then Durafa will introduce you. Yeah. And then
Do I introduce Isaac Bryant or is that
so it's unclear.
Not as a mayor, for sure.
Scheduling challenges, we're looking in the end, we're going to do
As a
that.
survivor.
And I'm guessing you're going to
That's
introduce
what we are.
I get reminded. San Joaquin.
You can just
My good friend
We're
Tori.
going to wait a couple more minutes, and we'll get started in 2 minutes.
save you the hassle.
District Attorney.
Just that she said she was on the way, so.
Yeah. My good friend. I mean, it's the reality of it, right?
And we're not gonna open this up to sort of wild west discussion.
Yeah.
We're gonna make this available afterwards.
Sure.
Right? You know what I mean?
Sure.
We're not gonna.
Well, I suffered from ESL, and I don't know if suffering is the right word, but I learned how to speak Spanish before I learned English, so sometimes the vowels are what I get wrong.
And two, everybody is really going back to
All right.
their names. So long there.
Well, I'm okay with what you're right.
Came in.
We'll slip in for you.
All is good in the hood. If that's what I'm going to worry about, sister, I got bigger things to worry about.
That's a good. That's a good day.
I got lots to worry about, but not that. All is good in the hood.
How's Kelly doing? Kelly's doing great. Yeah, she's doing fine. Working on a lot of racial equity stuff in the city. Yeah, I'm so excited for all the work we're
Doing
doing
this early.
to do in terms of First
That's a big
Nation stuff.
job. cities.
I think we are, you know, and even with all the rough times, it's like we are leading and we're forging ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, it's all about scaling.
Yes,
So
that's what it's about.
We were at
absolutely.
the Rose Garden yesterday. You guys get a chance to walk over there.
But I'm not ready to work on my tan yet, I'll tell you that.
I have, but it's uneven.
And so I was wearing a skirt today. I was like, oh, those are some of my clothes. Jill moved over and brings me this week.
Yeah, but we also don't get down.
Yeah, they should be banned.
Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanish Hollins. I'm the Executive Director of Californians for Safety and Justice. Glad to be here in the city of Sacramento today to uplift some very important topics and hopefully very important priorities for the state of California. In February 2022, CSJ, along with 60 other community leaders from across the state, came together calling for the state to prioritize safety. We called for Safety Now. And the goal behind that call to action was for the state to prioritize investments in prevention, intervention, trauma recovery, reentry services, and really upscaling our opportunities to keep our community safe. Today we are coming back to the Capitol with concrete asks for the state of California to prioritize more comprehensive approaches to safety in their budget. What we are presenting today is 6 months in the making, a coalition of partners that includes Smart Justice California, ACLU California Action, and many other organizations throughout the state, putting together a response to the crisis of violence that too many of our neighborhoods are experiencing. And sadly, what recently occurred here just steps away from the Capitol highlights the urgency of that need. Sacramento is not alone in that. I'm a native of San Francisco. I'm also a survivor of gun violence. I've lost 2 brothers to gun violence, and our city is also seeing the horrible impact of crime and violence on our neighborhoods. We are coming together to call for a real infrastructure that addresses the needs of prevention at a local level. And we get the gravity of the cycles of trauma that continue to impact our communities. We can tell you firsthand as organizations that have been on the ground that we have been calling for this for decades. And unfortunately, our calls have been ignored. And so now we want to set the state's priorities with a list of recommendations that are a compilation of investments that communities have been calling for to address trauma, to address the failure of prevention, and not just one city or not just one system. For all communities and all systems, we want them to work effectively. We want our communities to be safe. And so we are here today to call on Governor Gavin Newsom, Honorable Tony Atkins, Honorable Anthony Rendon to prioritize the urgent need of community-based public safety investments, which includes crime survivor support and prevention measures. This is what we want to see happen in the state of California. The priorities that we're outlining cover many different areas, including scaling up the amount of resources that are available to victims and survivors in the state of California, removing barriers to eligibility, providing more flexibility with the cash assistance that are offered to victims and survivors, making sure that resources are available at the community level so that more folks can get access to treatment and recovery services closer to home and have an opportunity to heal and rebuild their lives. Additionally, looking at scaling up reentry support throughout the state, stopping the cycle of harm by doing more investments in our public health and community-based crime prevention programs, and looking at interventions around gun violence, also mental health and addiction treatment. We really want to make sure that the state is looking at all the infrastructures that we need to replace the systems that are currently failing us and are leading to this violence that we see happening in our communities today. So I want to stand back and hand this over to the Mayor of Sacramento, Mayor Darrell Steinberg, to talk a little bit more about our safety priorities.
Hi. I got a fan. Yes, I do. Thank you, Tanish, very much. Thank you to Californians for Safety and Justice, the ACLU, Smart Justice California. It's wonderful to be with old friends like Senator Maria Elena Durazzo and Assemblymember Miguel Santiago, Assemblymember Isaac Bryan. This is both an untimely event and a very timely event. For as you know, my community has lived through a trauma, a deep trauma over these past days. And I want to be very clear about several things. I wholeheartedly support the package of legislation and funding requests that are the subject of today's press conference. But I want to make it clear, I am not talking about I am not talking in this context about the individuals who have been accused of this horrendous crime that occurred Sunday morning in Sacramento. I have some very serious questions about why the alleged perpetrators, and it is an allegation, were out on the streets. And those questions need to be answered, and they will be answered over the days ahead. But I think if we're going to be leaders, it's also a time for reflecting on a whole host of things relating to criminal justice. And this is the truth. The failure to re-enter people effectively is itself a major public safety issue. We are standing mere blocks from the Sacramento County Jail. And let me tell you what happens here. And we're not alone. Happens in every major city. But what happens here in my city? Every morning, early in the morning, people are discharged from that jail without anything. Without housing, without a follow-up plan to help them re-enter society, without a plan for mental health or substance abuse treatment where it is needed. They are left to the winds. And many of them, of course, are part of that endless cycle of jail, homelessness, emergency room hospitalization, back again. We can do much better. In fact, we must do much better here in California. This is a systems problem. It's a systems problem. And this effort, this important effort, is calling attention to the fact that our systems need to do more to ensure that people who have been part of the criminal justice system do not remain part of the criminal justice system for their long lives. And you know, money matters. It matters because it's what's needed to fund the mental health treatment, the substance abuse treatment, the housing. It's good to see you this morning. But if we're really going to fix these systems, and I know this isn't on the agenda today, but I'm going to say it anyways. This money needs to be matched with clear changes in the law in ways that we have never considered before. There needs to be a legal right to housing and a legal right to mental health treatment for people in California, especially people who most need the help. Until these systems, because it's not about systems and individuals, but until these systems are required to respond to the need, until these systems have a legal requirement to meet that person leaving the county jail and wrap ourselves around them to ensure that they're sheltered, housed, that they're treated for whatever underlying conditions they have, that they are provided some sort of vocational assistance so they can work. Until that is required as a matter of law, all this money is going to help a lot of people, and it's absolutely necessary. But we are still going to have broken systems. I, for one, am tired of it. I was tired of it long before the trauma in my community, long before the trauma in my community last Sunday. I'm tired of forsaking people. I'm tired of pretending that we care about those who have fallen on hard times or maybe have done something wrong and paid their price, that they don't get another chance to actually succeed and do the right thing here in society. Let's take this money and let's put it to good use, and let's help more people, and let's make sure that we got 24/7 wraparound intervention and care for anybody who leaves that county jail. And you better believe that will avert more tragedies in the future and will make for a safer and a healthier California. Thank you very much. Let me turn this over to Carlos Marquez, ACLU California Action. Thank you so much, Carlos.
Good job, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks and for being here, Mayor Steinberg. Carlos Marquez, Executive Director of ACLU California Action, representing the 3 ACLU affiliates statewide. I want to just thank the local and state elected leaders who've joined us today in calling for real public safety solutions that go directly at addressing the root causes of crime. I've been reflecting this morning on a quote that's been famously attributed to Desmond Tutu. There comes a point when we need to stop pulling people out of the river, and we need to go upstream and find out why they're being thrown in the river in the first place. The reason I love that quote for today's context is because it speaks to the experience of both victims of crime and perpetrators of crime. Public policy responses that only superficially redress crime and harm once it's perpetrated, rather than preventing harms from happening in the first place, fall far short from the moral that Tutu was espousing. Going upstream, so to speak, to address the root causes of crime requires the political will and the funding to back it up. Unfortunately, powerful special interests are trying to exploit this moment to roll back the will of voters and the decisions that voters have made over the last decade. Voters have said, as recently as 2020 and over the last decade, that we must reduce mass incarceration and invest in rehabilitation. The budget we're proposing today funds programs that we know work and that voters support if they're provided the funding to work. While voters have stepped up over the last decade to demand greater investment in alternatives to mass incarceration, funding for these programs haven't always matched the bold reforms that our electorate has supported. Today, we're asking that our elected leaders step up too, and that these programs can be immediately funded to prevent crime and to heal those who've been harmed by violence. Our budget proposals include a historic investment in mental health treatment for people involved in the criminal justice system. 64% of voters back expanded mental health treatment over sentencing enhancements as a solution for preventing crime. Yet even when all stakeholders agree, when we're dealing with folks who have mental illness, who are in the criminal justice system, that they should be diverted to mental health programs, we know that implementation is a great challenge because we haven't committed the necessary investments to make these interventions work. So today we are proposing $200 million to ensure that mental health diversion actually can do what it's intended to do and prevent crime and help rehabilitate folks who need it the most. We look forward to working with legislators who are present today to ensure the programs and interventions that voters have supported over the last decade are funded, and that we address the root causes of crime that have been further exacerbated by the pandemic. And all of the factors related to the pandemic we know that have destabilized individuals, families, and communities here in Sacramento and all over the state. And next, I'd like to welcome Phil Melendez from Smart Justice California.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you all for being here. As he mentioned, well, he didn't mention how short I was. Let me just fix that for you. As he said, I'm Phil Melendez, Director of Special Projects with Smart Justice California. And we've heard a lot of arguments lately about crime and who's to blame. And it's sad that we're focused on playing the blame game and instead of focusing on treatment. We need to do better. We need to think more creatively about how we address crime and harm in the community. But one thing that we can all agree on is that when crime is up or down, and no matter who's in office, we take it seriously and we work relentlessly to support those that suffer from it. And to do that, we need to invest in communities and prevention, because for so long we've failed to adequately fund and invest in people and resources for healing, which is unacceptable, especially when you consider how far healing can go towards violence prevention. And I'll tell you a little bit about that through sharing a little bit about myself. As a teen, I committed horrific crime in my community, but I'm also the survivor of violence. My cousin was brutally stabbed to death. My stepbrother we lost to gun violence. And in our communities, children and families are trapped in these endless and devastating cycles of violence. Growing up, I incurred trauma upon trauma in a neighborhood full of gangs. And that's what we looked to for support, because we did not have healing spaces. This budget requests funds for community-based programs that work with kids from neighborhoods like mine. These evidence-based programs like youth outreach and group violence outreach are proven to meaningfully prevent violence and reduce participation in gangs. This budget request also includes funding for public health and community-based prevention infrastructure. And these are much needed changes, because we've been incarcerating our way to public safety for decades, and hasn't worked. And to keep doing so and hoping for a different result is the true definition of insanity. Interventions like these can change and save lives. If I had access to these types of programs, my life may have been different. I mean, I may have prospered, but more importantly, I wouldn't have made those horrible decisions and that ended in so much pain and sadness and a loss of human life. Children and families in our communities deserve better. We must fund and support ways to end traumatizing cycles of violence. I've been asked many times, what would have helped me to take a different path? And I've had decades to reflect on it. And my answers are mentorship, a loving community, and people to tell me that I had value. That would have went such a long way in changing my life. And taking this approach proactively makes so much more sense to me. So much more sense than what happened on Sunday, as the mayor had mentioned. And while I was incarcerated, I was fortunate to find a rare space where I could unpack my trauma and move in a positive direction. And after that, I was given another opportunity to put it to good use. I've mentored neglected and traumatized youth while I was incarcerated. I've worked with survivors of crime to work towards healing. And I continued that work when I came home. But unfortunately, not everybody who's incarcerated has those opportunities. And also unfortunate for the community, over 90% of those people are going to return home. So we have to fund these types of programs. If we don't invest in the programs contained in AB 1816, California will perpetuate a system that relegates some of its most vulnerable people into a cycle of near guaranteed failure, which does the actual opposite of creating public safety. Thank you. And before I go, I will bring up my good friend, District Attorney Tori Verber Salazar.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. And as a sister county to Sacramento, Mayor, we offer our thoughts, our prayers, our full support. And we thank you for your leadership today in being here to create change and solutions that are going to reduce crime and ensure public safety. As many of you know, crime is an issue that is in every community across the nation. and we cannot revert to the old ways, because the old ways continue to give crime a pathway forward. What we want to do here today with this program and opportunity is to address the core issues that face and drive crime. That is mental health, substance abuse, extreme poverty, destabilized homes, home violence. Those all have to be addressed, because when those have adequate pathways forward, people are healed, they are healthy. And when your home is healthy, your community is healthy, your crime goes down and your economy goes up. They are simple tools, but they are also expensive tools, and they have to be funded. So many mothers come to me and say, my son has to commit a felony before he's going to get mental health services while he's incarcerated. That's not a solution. So many mothers and fathers come to me and they say, when my son went in or my daughter went into the county jail, they did an assessment tool that asked if he or she was going to, or they or them was going to return to court. They didn't ask, what's going on in your journey? Where are you in your life? What are your issues? How can we help? How can we design a program that will effectively allow you to re-enter society with a successful pathway forward? Some people like to label things, light on crime, tough on crime, hug, whatever the case may be. It's none of that. It's absolutely none of it. It is public safety, victim prevention, and creating and healing our community. And if you don't have the courage to stand up for that, then you are saying you're okay with more victims in our community. Just think if we could have had those services to these people who commit these crimes before they committed it, then I'm not standing here today with 6 families who are planning funerals. Same in my community, same in any community. We have to invest in change, and change comes with services for mental health, substance use, addiction, alcoholism, poverty, violence in the home. We have to have those stabilizing factors. Once we make that investment, I can almost guarantee you crime will come down, because when we put those resources into families that we're dealing with right now, the violence stops. The home is stabilized and the community is healed. This isn't just an investment in an individual who's in crisis. This is an investment in each one of us. Because if we don't address this at any given time, on any given day, we could be a victim. And wouldn't you have wanted your money, your resources, your hard-paying tax dollars to go to programs that would make sure when you're walking down the street, you are safe? That when you're in your home, you're free of fear. And when you're out shopping, you have no worries. This is the investment we're making in each of you to ensure your safety and well-being. Please support us in this journey. Allow us this opportunity to heal our communities, to give people a pathway forward, to make them successful, to reduce crime, and to protect our victims, and better yet, prevent them from ever happening. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the Senator, please.
Good morning, buenos dias. My name is Maria Elena Durazo, State Senator representing Los Angeles and East LA. East LA, yeah. It's an honor to be here with my colleagues and to talk about this very important issue, an issue that I have been working on my entire life, and that is the fight and the creation of good paying jobs. There's nothing more important to a family, to a community, than a good paying job, a career that will help you raise your family, that will contribute to your neighborhood, that will contribute to your state and to your country. As chair of the Senate Budget Sub 5 Committee, I am proud to say that this year we are making historic investments in our workforce with an emphasis on high road jobs and high road training. We're continuing the reforms needed to reimagine our justice system and address racial disparities and support our victims and communities. I'm committed to expanding the reentry support, including the statewide Reentry Employment Fund. We have the facts and the information to guide us in supporting these critically important programs. This $50 million investment could transform job opportunities for our justice-involved brothers and sisters. This year, we have prioritized a one-time investment of $50 million into a workforce recovery program to provide dedicated, multi-year state funding for reentry services, help fund multi-craft core curriculum training programs that give you a real career primarily in the construction industry. We, and programs that offer, think about this, not a minimum wage job, but an unsubsidized job. A job that will help sustain that family and pay all the bills and the things that a family go through. Those are the jobs. So we want to scale this up across the state to involve more and serve more individuals. Research backs up decades of our lived experience. I've been involved with second chance programs. It's lived experience that over-reliance on incarceration only worsens the conditions that create violence and does nothing to actually prevent crime in the first place. We know what works and we know what doesn't work to protect our communities from harm. Career pathways and training programs for individuals re-entering our communities should lead and will make sure lead to quality, in-demand jobs while providing support, as the mayor said, every step of the way to a new life. A new life built on the foundation of a good job and the dignity of work that comes with a career and a good job. And I want to mention my bill, SB 731, as one of those pieces of legislation to remove the barriers to jobs and re-entry into our community. The pandemic has changed our way of life. We need inclusive and equitable recovery that addresses the disparities that existed before the pandemic. Now's the time to improve access to services for victims of crime. Now is the time to strengthen the Victims Compensation Program and remove barriers to accessing victim services. Thank you all for the great work that you are doing. Gracias. And I want to introduce my colleague from the Assembly, Assembly Member Miguel Santiago from Los Angeles.
Thank you everybody for being here today. Look, we're here for a very simple reason. Because the work of restorative justice, the work of fixing the criminal justice system is not complete without these historic investments. And when you take a look at some of the communities we represent, when you take a look at what kids grow up with, these are real live struggles. Like, I taught once middle school, and I share this story with everyone. When I taught middle school in a working class community, the difference between the community that I taught in and the community on the west side or in the hills or in a better to do community was very different. The kids that we taught left the classroom, went across the street to a park until their parents came home from work. And if the parent was working a second job, then we'd have to figure out where those kids were going to go. The kids in the good side of town had the resources. They had the nannies that had tutoring, or they had somebody at home where they can come home and get the kind of assistance and work on homework and do all the things that kids we would want to do in every neighborhood. The investment that we're asking for today takes a recognition that there are two different sorts of Californias here. And that the work that we've got to do to invest in victims, to invest in preventive strategies, is absolutely needed. It's imperative that we do it if we're going to continue the work of fixing a criminal justice system that has been broken for decades. Look, the cheap, easy political thing to do is to say, lock them up and throw away the key. That's the cheap, easy thing to do. You get a headline, it makes you feel good for a little bit, but that hasn't worked. In fact, we're here today because decades of tough on crime policies created the situations that we're in today, where we've mass incarcerated people of color in working class communities. Today we're here because we want that investment. The voters have stepped up, now it's our turn to step up as well and make those sorts of investments in our communities that are absolutely important. I represent the Boyle Heights area. Most of you will know that's the home to Father Greg Boyle, who spent his entire lifetime stopping gang violence, but getting our young people into a positive journey that includes a job. And I'll quote him because they often will tell you when you get into a conversation with them that nothing stops a bullet quicker than a job. I mean, that's the bottom line. If we don't invest in our communities early, if we don't invest to make sure that there are alternatives, that we do prevention programs, that we get a person a job, that we uplift communities, We don't invest that we have a park, that we have nonprofits, that we have a place where a kid can go play instead of finding something else to do. We're going to be here for the next 20, 30 years wondering how we haven't fixed the violence on the streets. This work of restorative justice is not complete until we make the investments that are absolutely necessary. And I'll say it again, the voters have stepped up. It's our turn to step up and complete this work because it's much needed. And the consequence is too grave and the suffering is too much if we don't step up and do the work that is absolutely needed. Our generation of kids are going to depend on it. This is not an abstract thing that we can look at and look at a statistic or point at charts or say it happens over there. This is going to happen in our neighborhoods. And who suffers are those kids. Who suffers is our communities. And what's at stake is pain and suffering. And we're not going to fix this unless we invest in it. And our budget is a statement of our values. So if we value this work, if we want to improve the conditions on our streets, if we want to prevent crime from happening, if we want to help victims, then we've got to invest in it. So this is a real modest investment that you could actually take a look at it. Compared to what we spend on, you could even look at this and say it's budget dust to invest in what we want to complete this work. Y para los medios de comunicación en español, este trabajo no está completo si no invertimos el dinero para asegurar que nuestras comunidades tengan este invertimiento de organizaciones no lucrativas para dar opinión, para dar diferentes oportunidades para nuestros niños y nuestras comunidades y también asistir a las víctimas, porque este trabajo de justicia social, este trabajo de no seguir nada más aventando la llave, encarcelando a gente, necesita este tipo de invertimiento. Simple es el invertimiento de ayudar a la gente que son víctimas de la violencia que hemos estado viendo y asegurar que haya programas para prevenir las violencias. Look, it's not a difficult concept. If you water a plant, it grows. Si le damos agua a una planta, crece. So if we want to prevent, if we want this movement to grow, if we want to help victims, then we've got to invest. No different than plants. Pretty simple. We got to water it, it grows. We want this to work, we got to invest in it. Thank you very much, and I think I'm handing it back.
I want to thank the Assembly member, the Senator, and all of our partners who are here today. I especially want to thank Phil for sharing his personal testimony. As a survivor, that is not an easy thing to do, but I know that we bring our personal selves and our personal stories to this space to help folks understand the gravity of the issue that we're talking about. Before I hand it over for questions, I want to make sure that the public at large understands one thing. What we are talking about is not charity. This is justice. When we are talking about preventing things from happening in the first place, when we talk about dealing with unaddressed trauma, when we talk about prioritizing mental health, when we talk about meeting people's basic needs, when we talk about removing barriers so that people can actually make good on those basic needs, secure housing, that they can take their children to school, they can feed their families, regardless of their background, that is public safety. And justice is no good, accountability is no good without the opportunity to heal and stabilize people's lives. That is a common sense understanding and approach to public safety, and I understand that our values may be different in the state. The way that folks understand the issue of public safety may be different in this state, and especially in this moment. But we have a responsibility to expand the definition of safety. We have an obligation to look at safety differently in the state, in our communities, and in our budget priorities, and that's what we're calling for right now. So we hope that our state leaders continue to move in that direction. In many ways, the state of California has been a leader. Many of our agencies have worked very hard to align with some of the things that the community has been calling for, but we realize in this moment that it's not enough. And in order for us to scale up the replacement for what's been failing us, we need these investments to happen now. And so I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank you, Mayor Steinberg, for your heartfelt words and for your commitment as a city and local leader, but also as a statewide example of what leadership should look like around this issue of safety. And to all of our partners on the ground and those who are in the legislature who are working to make this real by making sure that the investments are there and that they go to the right places to the folks who are on the ground serving our communities and keeping them safe. We'll open it up for questions. We're now opening questions.
Those individual participants are available for comment.
Thank you.
Speak to them individually right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.